All right, MYB, thank you so much. Welcome back. We're here at episode number 164, Entrepreneurship, Real Estate, Trending News. There's no business like minding your own. I'm your host, Champ Ron, here with the Minding Your Business podcast. Hope everything is going well. Thank you so much for listening to the special edition Father's Day podcast from this past Sunday. I got tremendous feedback from all of you. It was very positive, and I thank you for listening and for sharing that episode. Subscribe to the podcast, 5-star on Apple, wherever you get your pods. If not on Apple, maybe Spotify, maybe YouTube, maybe SoundCloud, Google, wherever that is. That helps us be able to spread this great podcast content even further. And so thank you so much. And you can visit us at themybpodcast.com. I'm excited about today's guest who is joining us. She is certified financial planner, and she's with Bright Investments, LLC, as a partner, a vice president, and wealth advisor. And she brings over 25 years of really great, diverse experience in the industry, in an industry that tends to be often dominated by men. She's been able to thrive and be a resource for her customers and an advocate for financial independence and financial literacy and financial strength for all of us individually and professionally. And so I'd like to welcome Stacy Miller here to the podcast. Thank you, Stacy, for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Ron, for having me. I'm really excited to be here this morning.
Excellent. Yep, I love that. Let's jump right in. So tell us all who Stacy Miller is.
Sure. Okay. Well, as you mentioned, I'm a certified financial planner, and I'm a partner with a small independent wealth management firm. We are fee only, and we are fiduciaries, which are two really important distinctions for us.
Sure.
I came to be a partner 4 years ago. And I'm very grateful for this experience that I'm on now. But life before Bright Investments, born in Massachusetts, currently living in Tampa, Florida, with my family. My husband just retired from 27 years of active duty military service with the Army.
Excellent. Yep. Thank you for his service. Thank you.
I will. And so that makes me a military spouse, which has really defined who I am. And we have two children, both in college. And by college, I mean my living room doing their online learning, because colleges are shut down right now.
Right.
So we're all home together in Tampa, enjoying the family time. But that's the gist of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And how are things in Tampa? Obviously we'll get to this in a little bit more depth with the current pandemic that's going around. How are things in Tampa? Are everybody able to remain relatively safe? We hear about the numbers in Florida, and so
it's a little bit of a hot mess right now. Yeah, a little bit of a hot mess. And it's the millennials that the numbers are skyrocketing with right now. And that's because, we entered phase 2. So gyms and bars are open. And so the, predominantly non-socially distant kind of things where there's a lot of opportunities for exposure. And I think that younger crowd also, a lot of them don't realize they have COVID. And so it spreads a little bit because they haven't tested and don't realize that. Yeah. But, we just passed, both a city and a county-wide ordinance. You have to wear masks indoors, whether you're employees or guests. And so hopefully that's going to put a big fat squash on these outrageous numbers that are coming across the data here. So.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Let's take a step back, Stacy, because you described kind of your background. What led you into finance? Because I'm always interested in that pathway that people take, or that journey that takes you into finance.
Sure. So a number of things. I will say, as a young adult, I had some experience working in an accounting firm, and I loved it. And so that experience led me to the opportunity to get my MBA. So I have a master's in business administration, and my concentration is in finance. So I have the educational background, but the opportunity to be with Bright Investments that I'm living right now, there's decades of a gap between those two, because we moved 14 times in 27 years.
Wow.
And so, managing a career during that, and also having and raising children in different states and, just completely different scenarios, I was not able to follow a straight path. But
Sure.
I always kept my finger, on the pulse of finance in some way. So if I didn't have a job, either I was unemployed or underemployed, I was the treasurer of some nonprofit organization, or, just continue to stay in the realm of finance in whatever ways that I could, until I had the opportunity to join Bright Investments. And the timing was such that it was around the time that my husband was considering retiring, and
Sure.
my kids were going off to college. And so, I spent 3 years working on becoming a certified financial planner. It's a extraordinary amount of education and experience, and a beast of an exam that's required.
Oh, of course, for Series 7. I've taken that exam, and I tell you, I did come up short.
Well, the CFP exam is different than the Series 7,
no, that's
but
true. Yeah.
equally horrible. Sure. But I'm Series 65 licensed, and passed the CFP exam. And so that I finally had the opportunity to pursue, the finance career that I wanted. And, my experience has always been taking care of people. So my husband was a leader in the Army, and that gave me the opportunity to be a leader of the families that were left behind during deployments. And so that really defined my roles. And so becoming a financial advisor, I had very important limitations on how I wanted to do that. I wanted to be able to take care of people.
Sure.
And I mentioned earlier on that we're fee only and fiduciary. And so those two things, and the fact that we're independent, means that I don't have products to sell. I just have a wealth of education and experience that helps me to provide advice.
Sure.
For my clients, whether it's wealth management advice or financial planning advice that can encompass things like everything from estate planning to, do you have the right insurance, so that you have all the bases covered. And that allows you to choose investments that are, fulfilling certain goals that you have. And so that's been very important, that I can take care of people in a way that's in their absolute best interest. That's a comfortable place for me to be.
Yeah, definitely. No, thank you for sharing that, because that's a very interesting pathway. Obviously, working together there with your husband. That's a very interesting pathway. You've spoken about family, Stacy. How important is family? Seems to be very important to you.
It is. Yeah.
How important is family to you professionally in the support of your career? Because obviously you were very supportive of your husband and the moves that you've had to make, and I can relate to that. I'm sure if my mom were on this podcast, we moved around a good bit too. Although my dad was not military, he was more contract engineering, civil engineer,
Sure.
and so that would relocate with different projects. But
right.
Talk about your how your family supports you professionally, and what that means to you.
They're an amazing support system. I think my husband always said, that he was going to retire, and then it was going to be my time to be the breadwinner in the family, and he looked forward to it. In his retirement, he continues to work. He's in a civilian government job right now,
Sure.
So he continues to work. But this was my opportunity to finally, kind of dig in a little bit more than I've been able to do. Even my kids have been so supportive. just using that beast of an exam I talked about that I studied
Yeah.
for months and months and months for, when I passed that exam, it was a big celebration here. And
Yeah.
my family knew I was going to pass it. I sure didn't, but they knew
Right.
I was going to pass it.
Right.
But absolutely supportive in the best ways. How can we help? Can we make dinner so that you can get some studying done? Just absolutely accommodating, especially my husband, because I have accommodated so many ways for so many years that he will do anything he can to support this.
Yes.
I have a great support, my extended family too. And it's been a wonderful time to be able to finally dig in and, create some of the career progress that I wasn't able to do over the last many years.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Stacy, let's kind of compare and contrast times a little bit here, because obviously we don't know if we're in the middle of a pandemic or we're just, we do know that's the reality of what's going on. As I mentioned earlier, talk about helping people create financial security pre-pandemic, and maybe compare and contrast that to during the pandemic. So once March hit and, we had all these abrupt changes and social distancing and quarantining became part of our vernacular worldwide, certainly here in the United States. Talk about how things were kind of leading up to that, maybe some of the, whether it's trends or kind of the mindsets of people. And then once that happened, what you're seeing as trends and kind of mindsets now.
Sure. I've said this a number of times. It's really not a great thing, but I think this pandemic is the I told you so that anybody that wasn't doing financial planning before now, they certainly wish that they had done some financial planning before March hit. And so for the ones that did do financial planning, my clients at the time, the markets have been very volatile for some time, but of course, we lost 25% in the S&P 500 in March, for example, because we had a plan in place and we actually planned for unexpected circumstances or crises or, pandemics, whatever it was. We planned for there to be something that was going to go awry. It wasn't everything. It wasn't just going to grow at 10% per year every year from now until the end of time. We planned for that. And so for that reason, I think my clients, while they felt uncomfortable, as did I, as did, everybody watching the markets, they understood that, we planned for this. We've chosen investments that, we hope are good long-term investments, and we just have to ride it out. So, like I said, there's two groups of ways to approach this pre-pandemic, the ones that had already done the planning and then the ones that hadn't. And of course, it's not just markets. People are losing jobs. Businesses are going out of business. It's, affecting everyone's livelihood in one way or another, or in many cases, multiple ways. And so we've actually had an uptick in phone calls, people reaching out to Bright Investments looking for advice and planning, because we know that while things are not great right now, there's another crisis down the road, and we don't know what it is and we don't know when it's coming, but there is something else. So how can I start today, with planning for the next thing? And another way to look at it, when the markets were down in March, I told a lot of people, it's kind of like a fire sale. Like these really great investment opportunities are now on sale. And, you've heard the buy low, sell high expression probably. So this was an opportunity to buy low and get a good investment at a good price. And so, there were some opportunities there that we tried to take advantage of. But the bottom line is right now in the middle of coronavirus, in the middle of this pandemic and quarantine, whatever level we're at, we can only control what is it within our control, right? And there's a lot that's not in our control right now. So if you wish you had that emergency savings that you read about in some magazine, so that you can endure a few months furloughed or out of work or something, then, when you have the opportunity, when you have that income again, then start planning for the next crisis, for the next thing, and start saving. And certainly I do recommend getting advice so that you can save in a way that's tax efficient. And, if investing is a consideration, that you're, making good choices, both in the things that you invest in and how expensive they are. So, advice can certainly provide some great way forward, but start planning now for the next thing, and just, control what you can control, and, just keep thinking positive thoughts, I guess.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And Stacy, why do you think people don't plan? Now, again, my background is in banking. I worked with people kind of on that other end of kind of setting up the initial infrastructure of, their financial lives, bank accounts, CDs, savings accounts, making referrals to people like you and others in other lines of business. And it always, I would marvel at how people would, particularly once they reach kind of the prime of their careers and they're at their highest earning levels, within their careers and things like that. Stacy, why do you think that people just either choose not to or just fail to plan financially? Because we plan a lot of things. We plan for birthday parties. We plan for vacation, for trips. We plan to have children. We plan a lot of things within our life. But for some reason, the financial piece seems to not be in that list of priorities. Why do you think that is?
There's definitely a number of reasons. I'm going to say that time is probably the first reason.
Sure.
They think they have more time to plan for it, or, they don't have time today, but they'll do it tomorrow. So time. I think people that don't know their, finances, how to invest, how to save, they can be intimidated by it. I certainly think that the industry does not necessarily help with that intimidation. And by that, I mean, a lot of organizations are not super transparent about their fees. And some organizations are not always, making choices for their client that are in their best interest. So, the industry is a little intimidating, and just sometimes a lack of knowledge is intimidating. And, there's always something else that you can be working on that's more fun. And, I've said that many times to clients that, I'm here. The reason that I'm able to do what I'm able to do is so that you can do what you either have to do or what you want to do.
Right.
Certainly, I have a lot of clients that are completely capable of managing their own finances. They are just choosing to delegate that because of either time or interest.
Sure.
So those are the two big factors, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I can speak to that a little bit when you talked about the intimidation factor, because I did want to go there, Stacy, because I remember having a lady whose husband had passed away and left a fairly sizable insurance policy and, pension and that sort of thing here in Memphis. And she lived in a more established area of town here within the urban core. And she would come to my branch and she just had all this money just dumped in her checking account. So all of a sudden I pull a report and her checking account went from, $3,000 or $4,000 all of a sudden to, like 1.8 million. It's like, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on here? And so she came in and I was naturally going to refer her to one of the larger, kind of financial institutions here, wealth management institutions. And she said something to me that stuck with me. She said, I don't want to do that because I don't feel comfortable, and I don't trust those people. There's nobody that looks like me. There's nobody, they're going to make me feel stupid, because, there are all these white shirts and red ties all over the place, or blue ties. And then here I come in and they're going to be talking over my head. I'm not going to know what anybody's doing and that sort of thing. And that just kind of stuck with me. And when you said that, it triggered that thought that a lot of the industry has not made it easy for people to trust it. Of course, you have what happened in 08, 09, and 10, where everybody kind of got lumped into that issue. But a lot of people, depending on the walk of life that they come from, there's not that trust level and comfort level to go and go downtown, try to find parking. Who do I talk to, and are they going to have my best interest at heart? And so it leads me to a question with, obviously, you have genders obviously in different industries. And as I mentioned earlier, the financial, particularly on the wealth management side, has been mostly dominated by men. And so how is your transition into that being a woman, and being, kind of starting your career maybe a little bit later? How has that transition been, and how does the industry better attract females, for example, to enter the industry and be successful, particularly in today's climate, and has things of more conversations about race and gender and things like that been at the forefront now,
Right.
that we're having really progressive, or at least the most progressive conversations I think we've had in this country are happening now. And so talk about your pathway with that, in a very male dominated industry. And then again, how can, parents now listening to this, and then even young, folks that might listen to this podcast, what they can be doing now in that preparation if they desire to get into the industry.
Well, there's a lot there, Ron, but I want to start with first, you mentioned that client. That's sort of a new widow, we call it sudden money or sudden wealth. Yeah. And, oftentimes the widow is, a woman, because women tend to outlive men. Yes. And oftentimes the women are not the financial managers in the home, not exclusively on either count, of course. Yeah. But that's a place that I really think that I can personally can contribute. And there's a couple of reasons for that. My experience, like I said, as a military spouse, my husband as a leader, he was in the infantry and the Army. And so many deployments, there were many casualties. And so having a conversation with a widow is something that I'm very comfortable with doing. Yeah. And I think that's the first thing, is that, that first conversation, you have to develop a level of comfort. This is a very personal relationship. Your client, financial advisor relationship is very personal. Yes. And so, being able to communicate is so important. And in that example, as you said, the industry does not necessarily generate the trust factor. But yeah. I truly believe there is a financial advisor or a financial planner for everyone. There are advisors and planners that look like you. And by you, I mean your listeners, whatever they look like, male or female, black or white, whatever the scenario, there's someone there that you will be able to connect with. And so I think it's important to take some time and find the right advisor. Sure. You're right that women are, a little harder to find. I want to say women are like 15 to 17% of financial advisors in America. Even smaller percentage for certified financial planners. And I think, you mentioned race. I think Black advisors are an even smaller percentage, sure, as opposed to white advisors. So, finding the right fit is really important. And I know I have the conversation all the time with young people. I have this conversation with military spouses quite frequently that this is a great profession to be in, because there is the opportunity to work remotely. So whether you move from state to state, you know, and state licensing reciprocity is, you know, progressed a lot over the last years. So there is an opportunity. And so I regularly communicate with young people about the opportunities, young ladies, young men, whatever, just to get more really great people into the industry, to broaden the diversity, because, you know, it is important to find that relationship, that person that they don't have to necessarily look like you, but I think it helps that they can connect and understand where you're coming from.
Yes.
And so, you know, I always tell prospective clients, please interview, you know, several advisors. I want you to find the right person, the right person for you. And it takes time to build that level of trust. But when someone comes from a place of transparency, from a place of respect, and certainly, you know, the credentials are important too. I believe wholeheartedly in being a CFP.
Yeah.
Because it's, you know, more years of education, more years of experience, and a broader knowledge base.
Sure.
So I hope I answered your question.
No, you
was
did.
Kind of all over the place, but it's really important that you find the right connection. You don't just dial 1-800-financial advisor and whoever answers the phone. That's not necessarily the solution.
Right.
You know, find someone that's a fiduciary that will, you know, work only in your best interest. And you know, certainly keywords are important. Fiduciary is important. Fee only is important. You know, and then you're not limited to your area either. If coronavirus has taught us anything, it's that, you know, video conferencing and, you know, you're not limited to your locality, your space. You can find a financial advisor far, far away if you wanted to, if you find one that you can build a level of trust with.
Yep, absolutely. Stacy Miller is our guest today, certified financial planner, partner with Bright Investments, LLC. Stacy, let's go here because, you know, we've talked about financial planning and, you know, creating financial peace and financial security for people. What about estate planning during this time? You know, my wife and I, today's actually our 13th anniversary.
Oh, happy anniversary. We had our 26th last week.
Oh, really? Oh, good. Yeah. Well, have you, you know, I guess belated anniversary for you both. So it kind of is a great segue with our anniversaries all here. Yeah, we created our estate planning as right before we had children. So when we were pregnant with, you know, my oldest daughter, we began that process, began thinking about it, and we were able to do that and work with a great gentleman that has been with us along the way as we've had to, you know, include updates as we had additional children and things like that. You know, are your customers or maybe your prospects now, are they thinking more about estate planning? Obviously, there's the income piece of that, everything that you talked about with kind of building that legacy. But, you know, we talked some about fiduciaries. You know, what about estate planning right now? What's kind of some things that people should think about and consider as they've maybe heard about estate planning, but not really sure kind of what to do?
Sure. So coronavirus is a health issue first, right?
Sure.
People are dying from this illness. And so I know that people have been talking a lot about estate planning.
Sure.
I'm not an attorney, so I certainly refer that out, but that's generally one of the first questions I ask a prospective client is, do you have an estate plan? Do you have a will? Do you have a power of attorney? Do you have a healthcare proxy? So that if you become ill, if you become incapacitated from coronavirus or anything, you know, will you will someone be able to take care of your estate, your finances?
Absolutely.
And it also can start with titling. And I talk about this a lot too,
Very true.
that having a will is great, but anything that has to go through, the will has to go through probate, and that's time and money,
Yeah.
because you have to pay for attorneys, and
Right.
it's doesn't happen immediately. But there's ways to title assets, whether it's financial assets, investment accounts or checking savings accounts, or your home, or different things, so that they automatically go to your beneficiary if the worst happens. And that
Absolutely.
takes the time and the cost factor out of it. And so that's an important discussion that I have with my clients in building their portfolio, is titling assets correctly, so that we can make the next generation, make things easy for the next generation.
Sure. Yep. Absolutely. And then also to add to that, Stacy, about retirement. I've come across, of course, in my bank consulting practice, I work with a lot of bankers, of course, in the C-suite, mostly around the Midwest area of the country. And I'm noticing, some folks, and I think some had it planned, for this year. Others maybe have made that decision since March, and with everything going on, they've made the decision to retire. And we talked, about kind of that long-term thinking. That one of my concerns is that people, like you talked about with, the idea of even considering financial planning, which is the time, that we all tend to think that we've got more time than we actually have. Listen, I'm 39, and there was a time when someone said retirement. I was like, what? What are you talking about? I'm just getting started. And oh boy, has that, I'll be 40 in January. And now, now, of course, I'm not in any place for retirement right now, but
Right.
I can see, this, I'm at kind of that halftime point in my career where it's like, okay, I've done, say, 19, 20 years, and another 19 or 20 years, it's going to be a different kind of scenario. And how am I going to be best prepared for that? And so, what are your thoughts, on how you help your clients with that planning for retirement?
Sure.
Whether they're kind of more my age and kind of that borderline millennial Gen Xer, or if they're already in their time when they're going to be considering that in the next, year or few years. What's kind of
Right.
your thoughts there?
Look, I'm going to go back even further, and I'm going to start with my kids, who are 19 and 20 years old. And
Okay.
they both have established a Roth IRA account, which
Yes.
is a tax benefit account. We'll call it tax deferred, but it's technically tax free if you bide your time until you're 59 and a half. But without getting into that, the point is, you invest when you're 20, and you keep investing year after year. You've got 40 years of compounded returns. There is no better time to start planning for retirement than when you're 20. And
Oh, of course.
When you start working out of high school, you can start it even younger. But when you have a job and you have income, you should absolutely start retirement planning then, because when you have those extra decades of compounding those returns, it's really a sweet place to be when you turn 60, 65, 70, whenever you're going to retire.
Right.
When you're halfway through your age, if you haven't started saving for retirement, there's no time like the present.
Exactly.
That's within your control.
Yes.
So start saving for sure, and use those tax advantaged accounts, your retirement accounts through work, 401ks and those kinds of things, or IRAs, and it could be both depending on the circumstances. And for the group of people that are approaching retirement, certainly, March was really scary for the people that were thinking about retiring in 2020, 2021. Depending on the mix in their investment portfolio, they could be in an okay place right now because the market has rebounded. But, certain things in the market have rebounded, and certain things haven't. And so that's where advice, I think, comes in, is a really important factor, because hopefully they were not completely invested in the stock market when things went awry in March. Hopefully they had some other diversified investments within their
Sure.
portfolio that did not have the same kind of response that the stock market did. And that's part of the approach. As you get closer to retirement, you always have to balance, how much risk you're willing to take. Because I literally have a crystal ball on my desk, and I say it all the time that it's foggy 24/7. It's never crystal clear.
Right.
No one knows the future. And so you have to balance your goals with the risk that you're willing to take. Sometimes things go well and sometimes don't. You have to be diversified so that sometimes things are up and that compensates for the things that are down, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So certainly there's different phases for saving for retirement. But if you're listening to this podcast right now and you're not saving for retirement, start today.
Yes. Yep, definitely. So you've heard the commission here from Stacy Miller, our guest today on episode 164 of the Minding Your Business podcast. Start saving today, folks. Go ahead and make that phone call. Do what you have to do. Adjust your lifestyle however you need to do so. And of course, here shortly, we'll get contact information. So if you're interested in interviewing Stacy to have her be your financial guide and financial resource, we definitely want you to do that. Let's get into something a little fun here, Stacy. So
Okay.
I like to ask guests from time to time, if I were to show up at you and your husband and your kid's house with a Brinks truck, and I have $100 million cash, no strings attached, don't have to do anything. I'm just here you go, $100 million. What would you do with that kind of money?
$100 million. Well, go ahead. What was your question?
Well, let's go say all cash.
All cash. Stick some in my mattress? No.
Yeah. Sure.
Well, I'm going to take the same approach that I take, looking at my clients. And it's the same approach I take now is, I'm going to start with the things that there's a tax advantage, right?
Sure.
Obviously, I get that kind of income. Uncle Sam is going to want to know that and want his piece. But there are accounts that provide a tax advantage. So I'm going to maximize the opportunities there first.
Sure.
I'm certainly going to invest in the stock market in, a diversified way.
Sure.
And I'm also going to provide myself some kind of safety net, kind of thing. So, sure. Savings accounts, CDs, just, different things that have a different level of risk.
Yeah.
And I'm going to buy a house right on the Gulf Coast here in Tampa Bay.
There you go.
So that I can get up every morning and put my paddleboard on the water and commune with the dolphins and the manatees every single day.
There you go. That sounds like fun to me. That's awesome. As we kind of wrap up here, Stacy, and you've been tremendous. I really appreciate the insight that you've provided. I appreciate your kind of approach to the business, and I love you tailoring and kind of including your background and that transparency and working with people. I think that's tremendous with your background as a military wife and someone who's raised children now to have gone off to college and supported a husband and husband supporting you. Take me back to one of your challenging days in the business. And, I believe that there's something innate in people who are successful, that they're able to overcome obstacles and setbacks to continue to be successful, as we all face, and they're pretty much inevitable to various extents. And so, how did you overcome your first day, and how did you keep going when one of the easiest things for all of us to do is quit, right? You've seen that with,
sure.
With financial planning, it's easy to stop. It's harder for people to start, but then it's very easy to stop. Planning for retirement, planning for your estate, those things are very easy to just, up and just stop. And I think it's the same for life. And so what kept you going through tough times?
Well, starting with Bright Investments, like I said, we're a small independent firm. So I didn't start with one of the big wirehouses,
Sure.
in a training plan. So my training plan was figure it out in the deep end of the pool kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And, it's very discouraging when, sometimes you don't know what questions to ask, and you don't know how you can be making progress and how you can be getting smarter and how you can help people in the right way. But that was always my goal, is helping people. And
Yeah.
so continuing along my path, I chose to be a certified financial planner because I felt like that put me in the best position to be able to help people.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. Again, going back to your example from earlier,
Yeah.
I have a client that lost her husband on Christmas, and
Oh,
she has one college age son and two school age kids. And so she's a young widow,
yeah.
and really her husband managed all the finances. She really didn't have a clue what was happening. Very blessed that there was an estate to pass on to her and her children, but just really didn't know where to begin. Was completely overwhelmed with trying to figure everything out. And so she approached me, and it really filled my tank. That was the day. I mean, you asked for a bad day. I guess all the bad days led up to, this kind of day,
Sure.
where it really filled my tank, because I knew that, we could develop a relationship of trust. I knew I could help her. It, not terribly challenging for me, overwhelming to her. And so together we could, make things better for her, for her family. And so it kind of made it all worth it. So definitely struggles along the way, because, many years of not knowing exactly what to do and how to do it have paid off for me in this way.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, that testimony and that story there with your customer, because it all goes back to, people do business with people they have trust and confidence in. And you definitely sound like someone that people should have trust and confidence in, with your experience and going through those tough times. And like you say, not going through this big training with some of the big wirehouses, but, nonetheless, offering the same, if not greater level of value. And I think that's what, it all, comes down to at the end of the day. It's the great value that you bring there with Bright Investments. And so NYB community, you'll be able to go into the show notes to get all the link information to connect with Stacy. And I'd love for you to be able to do so. Of course, you can go to brightinvestmentsllc.com. That's the website. You can connect with Stacy on LinkedIn as well as on Facebook. And those will be, again, in the show notes. So I encourage you to do that and let her know that you heard her right here on the Minding Your Business podcast. Listen, Stacy, I know you're extremely busy. There's a lot going on. You and I probably could have talked the rest of the day about different things. Yeah, because there's so many subjects we could discuss. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your commitment to helping people. And, you said that. I think that kind of sums up. And thank you so much for that. And again, I hope that folks reach out to you and look to do business with you. And I'd love to have you back on at some point as we get down the line and we get through and battle the various pandemics that we're battling. And we'll see what the reality is on the other side. But best wishes and safety to you and your family. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you for your kind words. And I thank you for the invitation to be here. Actually, one of our Bright Investments partners lives in Memphis. So I know we have work that we'll be doing in your community soon. So I look forward maybe to meeting you in person as well.
Yep, absolutely. I'd love to connect and with our mutual contact. There's a tremendous friend and tremendous professional here, and look forward to doing that. So Stacy Miller is our guest today, certified financial planner, partner with Bright Investments LLC. Thank you again, Stacy, and look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you so much.
All right, MYB. So that was Stacy Miller here. Continue to support our various guests on the podcast. Again, themybpodcast.com. Also, just a quick announcement to let you guys know, the online directory is actually up and going now. So if you would like to be part of our directory that we're building on the MYB podcast site, it's a place to showcase your business. That is going to go out. Keep in mind, I am endorsed by 11 banking associations across the United States. Those banking associations advocate for the community banking industry in that state. So they have a ton of contacts. There's a lot of people that would love to know about your business and would love to use some of their disposable income to patronize your business. So if you like to do that, reach out to me by email, ron@themybpodcast.com. Very inexpensive to be part of that. And those banking associations have already committed to sending out in their communication and their publication the link to this directory. And so you'll want to be a part of it. And so make sure you email me, ron@themybpodcast.com. Okay. Thank you so much for supporting, again, the podcast. I hope that you're remaining safe. And I hope that after listening to Stacy, that you're really considering getting your financial plan started if you haven't. If you have, definitely kudos to you, but make sure to revisit that. Those are living documents, whether that's your financial plan, your estate plan, your retirement plan, or any plan. Those are living documents, and so continue to review those. And get with Stacy if you need help or if you have questions. That's how we should do that. So thank you so much. Go be great. Remember, we all have three things in common, no matter how we look in the mirror. We all want to be better for ourselves. We all want to be better for our families, and we all want to be better for our communities. So after we get past black and white and blue and red and all the colors sometimes that we use to divide us, remember that we have those three things in common. Okay, MYB, go be great. Champ Ron, the Mind Your Business podcast.